Hello Horror Hounds. In a very short period of time I'm heading outside to go and watch Blair Witch, and I thought probably the best way of kicking off a review of that film is to take a minute or two to explain my relationship to the original film, 1999's The Blair Witch Project, because I suspect it will colour my reaction to the sequel. I hope it doesn't, but we'll see. I'm really hoping for the best. I don't want to have wasted my money. Um, I get completely that in 1999, when this was released, if it was one of the formative horror movies for you as a younger kid than I was, that it will hold a very special place in your heart. I completely get that if you bought into the whole mythos and uh, the wonderful prank that it was true, that it could quite easily have scared the pants off you. I'm slightly less favourable towards the film, personally. Um, it's Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez are credited with having written, directed, and edited the thing. I don't think they should be fated in the areas that they are fated in. They didn't really direct it. The cast directed it. They didn't really write it. Pretty much all the dialogue was improvised by the cast. Where I think they deserve plaudits is for editing. They took 19 hours of usable footage and edited it into a movie. So I think it shows editing prowess. And to be fair, the stuff I'm more interested in is the background mythology that they came up with, which sort of only just insinuates itself into the film and is explored more fully in the fake documentary Curse of the Blair Witch that aired on, I don't know what channel it aired on in America, but aired before the release of the movie and played it completely straight and completely helped to sell the supposed truth of these events, and the stuff that they did on the website for the movie. And that, I think that really is where the true genius of that lies. And it's an artifact of its time. It's back at a time when we all sort of didn't question as much information we found on the internet. And if you went and Googled all the characters' names, even Internet Movie Database got in on the act and credited the actors for the first year of the movie's release as missing, presumed dead. So everywhere you went at the time, everything that came back sort of reinforced the story that they wanted to sell. It was a great piece of theatre, and I guess maybe on a par with the Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio show that he did, which had a real verisimilitude to it, and people freaked out. And we look back now and think, ha ha, those idiots thinking that Orson Welles War of the Worlds was real. Well, come on. 17 years later now, we can look back at ourselves and go, those idiots, they thought that the Blair Witch was real. So I don't know what this sequel can do. They've pulled off quite a nice little coup in shock announcing that the film even exists. A little bit of a 10 Cloverfield Lane deal. And that's nice. The Blair Witch Project itself, all the theatre aside, isn't that great, in my opinion. I think an effective final scene with a really shocking lo-fi visual at the end with Mike standing in the corners saved it for me. If that hadn't have been that, and that did jar me, and that did stay with me, but it just tipped it into the success bracket, I guess. It raised it for me slightly above an experiment in form rather than a really effective horror movie. So 17 years have passed, and what can we do now with the Blair Witch myth? I think the makers of Book of Shadows had a hell of a task. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but you can't play the same trick twice. You know, you can't pull the devil's tail twice. So they had to go in a completely wild and different direction, and sort of went metatextual, and parts of it pay off and parts of it don't. So are we going to get a 21st century approach to filmmaking that has learnt all of the pitfalls of the found footage genre that blossomed in the wake of the release of the Blair Witch Project? Or are we going to get a retread for the next generation? A cynical sequel that's really a remake? Are we going to get, is this going to be horrors The Force Awakens, or is it going to be something new and exciting? I will let you know what I think, for what it's worth, well, after I've seen it, obviously.
Okay, so I'm on my way home now, digesting what I've just seen. Feels really weird to be recording like this after having sat through 90 minutes of stuff like this. I'm glad I went to go and see it. I'm kind of glad Blair Witch exists. It's not a game changer. Ignore the blurb on the posters. If someone had told you, this is what it is. If someone had told you that they were remaking Blair Witch Project, the sort of best case scenario film you'd have in your head, I guess is what I've just seen. It hits a lot of the same story beats. It's a very similar story. The real comparison, the proper comparison, and this is why you come to me, YouTubers, for these kind of insights. It's more like how Ju-on the Grudge is to Ju-on the Curse. Now, I've not seen the two, I believe, Ju-on Curse movies. I've seen the Grudge movies. And the Ju-on Grudge movies, they're perfectly fine to go and watch them, to watch Ju-on the Grudge as your first experience of Ju-on. But if you've seen The Curse, then it's a sequel. It's a remix. Ju-on the Grudge is a remix, a continuation, an expansion of what's in The Curse. Blair Witch is a remix and an expansion of what we saw in the Blair Witch Project. It looks nicer. Camera technology in 2016 is better than it was in 1999. It looks nicer. It's bolder. The set pieces are bigger. It's louder. It uses sound to scare you. One of the downsides to it is that it uses an awful lot of cheap jump scares. Scares that you know are coming but are introduced so loudly that you can only butt jump. It's an unconscious reaction. And if you know a scare's coming as well, you brace for it, and then if the noise is loud enough, you will jump. It's not to say that there aren't moments of discomfort in there. As it builds towards the end, it gets very uncomfortable and very tense, and there are a couple of things in there that will stay with you. The stuff that expanded on the myth, the mythology, I really liked. And I think that's a testament to how strong a mythology was created to act as the foundation for the first movie. And where the film is weaker is that as a viewer you'll be about 15 minutes ahead of the film by the time it's barreling towards its conclusion. And that's an issue for the film, when as a viewer you're already 2 or 3 steps ahead of them and are waiting for the film to catch up. And whilst mythologically speaking the creators of the first movie set up the perfect situation for how this footage for the Blair Witch Project came to reach us, how it came to be pieced together. It was part of the story, part of the magic trick that they played with us as an audience. The second, for this film, Blair Witch, you start to ask yourself who is editing this footage together, who's put it in this format for us to watch. It completely falls to pieces, and that's another problem for the film. If there is going to be a Blair Witch 4, the makers of that will come across exactly the same problems that the makers of Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows came across. You won't be able to send a group of kids with cameras to document another journey into the Black Hills. You're going to have to try and do something different, and the story doesn't warrant it. We've had 2 stories now of a group of kids going into the Black Hills and coming a cropper, and in this one we've learnt a little more about the legend of the Blair Witch, a little bit more about what's going on, and that stuff I loved, and that stuff made me wish that someone would have a crack at maybe trying to film the mind-blowing novel House of Leaves, but I don't think there's any more story to tell. We got a peek at the wider world of the Blair Witch, and I think a peek is all we need.